how you attack based off of this next question, which is what should be the main focus this offseason. So, for example, I think most people are on the same page that interior offensive line is somewhere that the 49ers need to at least get some depth at, because you don't know how much longer Alex Mack's going to be there. Obviously, Brunskill's been up and down. And then the right guard with if McGlinchey's coming back, or how he's going to be off injury. But let's say we all agree interior offensive line is something that needs to be assessed. Well, just last year they took a second round on Aaron Banks when they could have gone up for, like you said, a Creed Humphreys, who obviously has had a great season. The previous year they went Javon Kinlaw instead of Tristan Wirfs, who has been an all-pro type player for Tampa Bay. So maybe you look at it, and even though interior offensive line is something that the 49ers need to upgrade at, seeing over these past 5 years, you haven't really done a good job in picking that in the draft. Maybe you go out and you say, let me take that as a free agent type of position that I fill as a void versus, using a high draft pick on that type of position. What do you think are some of the focuses, and what do you think that strategy should be based off of what you've seen the 49ers do?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the market. So like I've heard the safety market's pretty bad. So maybe they could get Tart for, $1 million or $1.5 million, even after his good season, or something like that. And those types of things. I believe the offensive line. So let me back it up to set up my point here. So like the draft results is greater per position. And then you also have people take higher picks on more quote unquote valuable positions like edge or wide receiver or quarterback, because they have a higher impact, right? Guard and center aren't sexy, right? This is going to be the first top 10 center, I believe, since 1975 in this draft. So wow. Yeah, I think his name's Tyler Lindbaum from Iowa. Anyway, so like if you look at the draft results from 06 to 16 in the first round, the success rate of hitting a Pro Bowler for the interior offensive line is 65%, where positions like D end and wide receiver are around 32%, because more teams take shots at those positions because they can revolutionize your team, where a guard isn't a sexy pick. So a lot of those positions drop down in the second and third round, where you might get a day one starter in round 3 for an offensive lineman, right? Or you might get a guy that can learn under Alex Mack and play center in year 2 or year 3 and be a 4th round pick. So, I think they should go for an impact player maybe in round 2. As much as they've drafted so many defensive linemen, maybe another edge guy that can play in the second round, a corner. I wish they would, evaluate a corner or safety, secondary. They haven't had a top 2 round pick for secondary since Jimmy Ward. So just putting more high capital into that position, would be something that to look at. So if they lose Tart, maybe draft a safety, or they're going to need K1 pretty much got roasted all year. So maybe look at a slot corner in free agency, or look at a slot corner in the 3rd round or the 4th round that can maybe play. Diamador Lenore has slot tendencies, and maybe so he'll progress. So I just kind of value and maybe impact player, but we got to start taking advantage of the rookie contract of Trey Lance now. And so whoever you pick in the second round's got to start day one. Where on the Niners roster is there opening for a day one starter?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it'll depend on, do they sign Lakeland Tomlinson? And then if they don't, if he gets good money somewhere else, you're going to need somebody to fill that position. So maybe you do go, interior offensive line and hope that Banks or this second round pick will work. Or if you lose said player, and I think there's a lot of moving pieces. I wonder how free agency will work and that market will work. I know I'm just all over this place. I'm trying to put the puzzle together for you, but
yeah, I mean, let's talk about Lakin. I think for me, that's somebody that is you get him in a room and you sign him. You don't let him walk. And the reason for that is a combination of, one, it's a need position, like that interior line is a need position. 2, he's the only lineman on that offensive line that is always healthy. So that, I think, is a premium, especially with the 49ers team that has just been debilitated by injuries during this tenure of Shanahan and Lynch. And again, the 49ers are almost on the level of terrible of drafting this position. So when you see somebody who you know is good, that works well with Trent Williams, that stays healthy, that you can just know that that left side of the offensive line is going to be good for the next 2-3 years, guaranteed. I think you got to take that and you got to give him whatever he wants and make sure he doesn't walk to another team because of how important, that position is to the 49ers. What about you?
Yeah, so let's look at. I'm doing this on the fly here. So top guard salaries. You got Zach Martin at 14, Joe Tini at 16, Norwell at 13. So if he's going to make top guard money, top 10, it's going to have to be over $9 million a year, right? So he's 29. This will probably be his last chance to get a longer deal with his age and cashing on the money of being a Pro Bowler. So if he's making 10 million or more, can the Niners really afford that? Will they be able to prorate the first year's salary to wait for the salary cap to boom up? But then you're also going to be putting in Debo's and Bosa's extensions very soon. And so how does that extrapolate? What is Tomlinson's worth there? But I think it's very interesting. So if you were to do the whole thing, they need to get deeper offensive line. So say they resign Tomlinson at 10 mil. They draft a center that maybe can play guard, and then you have Aaron Banks also who can play guard, and you have McGlinchey. Now you have a deeper roster, right? So you have that draft pick that can possibly – well, it looks like we lost him there. So, you maybe have a possibility of getting that Tomlinson. You have that center who can play both and really have that overall focus. But you need to protect Lance, and the quickest way to derail is his development is if he's always on his back because he doesn't have time in the pocket. So you need to invest in that. Whether he sits his first year and he's a second-round pick or a third-round pick, but behind Alex Mack, I think center is something to look at because Mack is getting older. He might retire before his contract ends, so that's something that I would work on getting back into that realm. So. If it were me, I would look at Tomlinson as a good hire. I don't know where they put that salary cap in or what the market is and how many free agents in the guard realm there are. But he's definitely probably worth that money after the season that he's put together. There he is.
I'm back. My bad. I have a technical.
So I just finished up pretty much saying that Tomlinson, I think, if you sign him, then maybe get that center or guard in the draft to kind of back up and learn because you have to get cheaper at some positions. You can't sign everybody.
Right.
So and then maybe you make room by trading away Dre Greenlaw or something like that. I mean, I know he's not making too much big money, but you can't sign everybody. And so we'll see how that works out. But secondary, they need to invest some capital in whether it be safety or corner or both. And then I would go interior offensive lineman again because, that Banks pick hasn't worked out so far. Will he get more run next season or will he develop in the offseason? Who knows? But, Mack is getting older, and to have a center to learn underneath him who might be a day one starter or close to, because like I said, those positions kind of get pushed down the draft, even though they're still comparable players. That way you have a succession plan or an injury risk plan because there really isn't a backup center on this team. Even last year, we're kind of lucky that Mack didn't get injured.
Right. I think that, I think that the 49ers should maybe use one of their third rounds or maybe even their fourth or fifth round to go after that center or interior guard. And really I like what you're saying. I think they could get a pretty good corner right there with their 61st pick. And in their second round pick, or like a high impact, secondary type player, whether it be a safety or, a corner. Defensive end, I know a lot of people are excited about. There's some people that are going to be on the board, but I feel like you shouldn't pick a project with your second round pick. I think you need somebody that's going to be able to be an impact starter right away. And, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, we got the whole offseason to talk about it. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with where the draft picks actually end up. And that's
But
a
if you,
great set. Go ahead.
yeah, if you're going to pay somebody on the defensive line like DJ Jones or, Arden Key was a 1-year deal, and these guys that have had record years, maybe they get more money elsewhere, right? So like Kerry Hyder had one successful year, went to Seattle Seahawks, so maybe they get more money elsewhere. They're athletes, they got to feed their families. So maybe we get outbid because, we're prioritizing Laken Tomlinson, right? And those other guys don't get the priority, and you have to get cheaper eventually. So maybe that's something that you look at, getting cheaper at D end, and getting a rookie that has potential. I've heard that the edge class in this one is pretty deep. And so maybe that would be the reason that you do that, is drafting edge because you lose out on an Arden Key or you lose out on, another player, and you have to rehabilitate that without signing those guys. So, but I would probably agree that Tomlinson is probably our most integral re-sign, and then him and DJ Jones, and then I don't think the safety market's going to be as hot as people think for Tart. And so if we don't get a safety in that second pick or that second round pick, or a one that can take over right away in the third round, then maybe you get Tart back again for $1.5-2 million. Like, it sucks for him because he had a good year, but the Niners have to pay with their mind and not their heart.
Right. And now there's 2 teams in the league that for a fact are going to be interested in 49ers players, with McDaniels in Miami and, Saleh in with the Jets. Waruna says, I would draft O-line before cornerback. Reason, Lance might hold the ball a bit longer than Jimmy Garoppolo. I agree as far as the need. I don't agree with drafting is going to be the solution because, like I said, Waruna, the best players on the offensive line right now with the 49ers are all people that weren't drafted by the 49ers. So I just believe that is a position where you go into free agency and you get somebody there, because the people that they do draft tend not to be as good. So that's why maybe with corner, they have had a little more success with corners. I think Ambry's going to be good. Even though they let Witherspoon walk last season, I still think, he was not a bust per se, but that's the way I look at it.
But let me ask you this question here though. If you're doing O-line and free agency, what O-line are you getting what lineman are you getting to back up our offensive line for depth that is good enough to be a starter? You're not going to get that unless he's a draftee, right? You're not going to get that unless he's cheap and he's
you look at a guy like Brunskill. He wasn't drafted by the 49ers. He ended up becoming, or I think maybe he was drafted, but he was was he?
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, either him or Tom Compton. One of them weren't drafted by the 49ers and ended up playing an integral role in actual offensive line this year. I think it was Brunskill, but I could be wrong.
No, Brunskill played for the Falcons and then the San Diego Fleet, and then he was undrafted in 2017.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. There are people that you can get, and I just think they're better at evaluating those type of people than they are with the draft. And, we could list the last 5 offensive linemen that have been drafted by the 49ers, and the only person that's really made any kind of noise is McGlinchey, who was a top 15 pick. So that's where I'm kind of just, you got to utilize your assets better.
I've liked what I've seen from Jalen Moore,
but he's not getting on the field.
Well, I mean, you have the best tackle in football, and then, and he's a swing tackle, and, he played tight end and defensive end and tackle. So
yeah,
he might be more of a project. And so we'll see. But my thing is Mac, eventually father time is undefeated. So eventually Mac is going to decline. I think a backup center, we got lucky this year that he never got injured. And that's something that we need to address, whether it's in the draft or in free agency, somebody that's competent that can maybe play both positions. If it's in the draft, you can get a pure center and just have him sit as a backup.
But I'm saying you draft him, just not with the second or third pick, just because not that you're not going to get the greatest player, because they obviously are there. 49ers just tend to not get them, right? They pick Banks over Creed, right? So I'm saying those are the type of decisions that we're seeing this 49ers regime make. Numerous times they pick They picked.
I agree with you on the second round. I said they needed a day one starter. Like they need a guy that's going to start right away with how cap strapped we're going to be. Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, Brandon, is there is a day one starter that's there in the second round at a need position at interior offensive line or center. The 49ers will misassess them and pick the wrong guy is what I'm saying. So don't even utilize the second round pick on a job. Not saying like any other organization, if it was, the Kansas City Chiefs, absolutely you use your second round pick to pick offensive line. They do a pretty good job picking guys. If you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, absolutely use your second round pick to pick an offensive line. They do a pretty good job picking offensive linemen. 49ers aren't that. So I would much rather them use a position that you've just seen them hit a little bit more on with such a high draft prospect, because you look at a guy like Aaron Banks, hopefully he turns out to be good, but if he doesn't, it's like, man, that was a top, that was a second round pick. And you look at all the other second round picks that you could have gotten, whether it be Creed Humphreys, like you said, or the cornerback that's Asante Samuel Jr. These are players that they could have picked instead of Aaron Banks, and Aaron Banks is just sitting there on the bench, right? So that's what I'm saying about that.
I think maybe that goes into the the veracity of the level of pick, right? There's been a lot of picks that haven't worked out on the Niners, but the ones that hit fans the most are the ones like Solomon Thomas, like Reuben Foster, like Aaron Banks, because those are supposed to be impact guys right away, and those were failed picks. Whereas like nobody cares that a certain player in the fifth round never worked out, because like we the chances are that he wasn't going to work out anyways. I don't know, and I don't think anybody really knows except for the Niners, like who their scouts are, what their their backgrounds are, and how well they are at scouting, how long they've been scouting, and so maybe your point is that maybe the Niners need to diagnose like where they've missed on certain position groups and address that in their scouting room to be more successful in those picks going forward.
Sure. Absolutely. That would be ideal. But if not, if they're just keeping the same guys and not doing it, just know your tendencies at this point, because after 5 years, you can tell, you know what I mean? So that's all I'm saying.